Hi, I'm Mira. Welcome to another story. Let's see where this one takes us. The museum loomed in the moonlight, its towering columns casting long shadows over the empty street. Cassian Drake stood in the shadows of a nearby alley, his sharp eyes scanning the building's facade. The air hummed with the promise of a perfect heist, one meticulously planned, mapped, and rehearsed to the second. For Cassian, there was no such thing as luck. There was only preparation. He clicked his earpiece. Mara, status. Cameras are looping? Mara's voice came through, calm and steady. The system's behaving so far. I'll guide you through once you're in. Cassian turned to his crew. Zeke, the muscle, adjusted his gloves, his bulk radiating quiet intimidation. Callie, the safecracker, leaned against the wall, twirling a slim pick between her fingers. Her sharp eyes gleamed in the dim light, and her smirk told Cassian she was ready to test the limits of his plan. "You sure this thing is worth it?" Callie asked, breaking the silence. "Unlimited luck sounds like something a hedge wizard cooked up." "It's a myth," Cassian said, his tone clipped. "But myths sell. The amulet goes to the buyer. We get paid, and we never hear about it again." Callie shrugged, her smile widening. "Whatever you say, boss. Just don't blame me when the universe decides it doesn't like your perfect plan." Cassian ignored her and nodded toward the museum's side entrance. "Let's move." The museum's interior was a maze of hallways and exhibit rooms, each guarded by a latticework of lasers and motion-sensitive alarms. Mara guided them from her perch on a nearby rooftop, her eyes glued to a bank of monitors. "First corridor's clear," she said. "You've got a 3-minute window before the next guard loop." Cassian led the way, his movements precise. Callie followed close behind, her steps silent. Zeke brought up the rear, his size making every maneuver seem improbably smooth. They reached the gallery where the artifact waited. At its centre, housed in a glass case, was the amulet, a stone disc carved with intricate patterns, its surface faintly shimmering in the dim light. It seemed to breathe, pulling the eye toward its endless spirals. "There it is," Callie whispered, her voice soft with awe. For a moment, her usual bravado faltered. "Doesn't look like much, does it?" "Focus," Cassian said, already unpacking tools to disarm the case's alarm system. "Zeke, the door. Callie, floor sensors." Callie dropped to her knees beside the pedestal, popping open a small panel in the floor. As her hands worked quickly to bypass the circuits, a strange sensation crawled up her spine. The hum of the room changed, subtle but insistent, as though something unseen was watching. Her fingers hesitated over the wiring. "Something's weird," she muttered. Cassian glanced at her, his jaw tightening. "Not the time for weird, just do your job." Callie scowled, but didn't argue. She reconnected the circuits, disabling the sensors. "Done." Cassian disarmed the final lock and carefully slid the glass case aside. The amulet glowed faintly, its carvings more vivid now that it was unshielded. He reached for it, but Callie grabbed his wrist. "Wait," she said, her voice low. "Don't touch it. Not yet." "What's the problem?" Zeke asked from the doorway, his tone impatient. "We're on a timer here." "It's just..." Callie trailed off, her eyes fixed on the amulet. She couldn't explain it, but something about the artifact felt alive. Her instincts screamed that taking it would change everything. "Move," Cassian said, shaking off her grip. He picked up the amulet, its warmth spreading through his gloved hand. For a brief moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, and then all hell broke loose. The alarms blared, red lights flashing. Mara's voice cracked over the earpiece. "What did you do?" "Everything's locking down. Cameras, guards, the whole system's freaking out." Cassian's mind raced. "Stay on it. We'll handle the guards." Callie shot him a glare as they sprinted into the corridor. "You didn't plan for this, did you?" "I planned for everything," Cassian barked back. "This wasn't supposed to happen." The sound of boots thundered from behind them. Zeke held the door as Callie and Cassian darted into the next hallway. The amulet clutched tightly in Cassian's hand. Its glow seemed to pulse in rhythm with the pounding of their hearts. "Something's wrong with that thing," Callie said, her voice sharp. "It's not just bad luck. It's doing this." Cassian didn't respond. He couldn't. The edges of his thoughts were fraying, his carefully constructed plans unraveling as the artifact's hum grew louder in his ears. The rational part of him refused to believe it, but he couldn't deny the sense that the amulet was orchestrating the chaos. As they rounded a corner, Cassian's grip tightened on the artifact. Whatever was happening, he couldn't let it break him. Not now. But in the back of his mind, doubt whispered, what if Callie was right? The museum was alive with chaos. Alarms wailed, guards barked orders over their radios, and the red emergency lights turned every shadow into a sinister threat. Cassian gritted his teeth as he led the crew deeper into the maze of maintenance corridors. The amulet was warm in his hand, its glow flickering faintly, almost in rhythm with the pounding of his heart. This way, he said, his voice clipped. He glanced over his shoulder at Callie and Zeke. Callie's face was pale, but her sharp eyes were locked on the amulet, as if it might jump out of Cassian's grip and strike on its own. Zeke, ever the stoic, carried his crowbar at the ready, though even he looked shaken. We're not going to make it to the exit like this, Callie said, her tone urgent but steady. Guards are swarming the place, and that thing isn't helping. Cassian ignored her, focusing instead on the blueprint in his mind. Every corridor, every ventilation shaft, every emergency exit, he'd memorized them all. Yet with every step, the path felt less certain, as though the museum itself was shifting around them. Mara's voice crackled through their earpieces. Cass, I'm trying to give you an exit, but the system's gone haywire. Doors are locking and unlocking randomly, and guards are converging on your location. What's happening? Cassian hesitated. His instinct was to blame Mara's tech, but deep down he knew the truth. The amulet was doing this. The very thing they'd come to steal was unraveling the operation. He could feel its hum vibrating through his fingers like a second heartbeat. Mara, stay on comms, he said tersely. We'll find a way. You better move fast, Mara replied. They're not holding back anymore. Cassian turned to Callie. We stick to the plan. The loading dock is the fastest way out. Callie stepped closer, her gaze flicking between him and the amulet. You don't get it, do you? The plan's already dead, Cass. That thing killed it the second you picked it up. He scowled. Enough with the theatrics. It's a piece of stone. It's not, Callie shot back, her voice rising. It's alive, or connected to something alive. I felt it the moment I disabled the sensors. It's not just messing with the building, it's messing with us. That's paranoia talking, Cassian said, but his tone wavered. Is it? Callie said, her expression hard. Then why does it feel like every step we take is exactly where it wants us to go? Before Cassian could respond, a door at the far end of the corridor slammed open. Flashlights cut through the red haze, and guards stormed in, their shouts echoing off the walls. Move, Cassian barked. They sprinted down the opposite hallway, their footsteps pounding against the concrete floor. The amulet's glow brightened with each step, its hum growing louder. Callie's head pounded as she ran, her vision blurring for a moment. Flashes of golden light, shadowy figures, and an unfamiliar voice whispered through her mind. Bring me back. The crew burst into a service room, slamming the door shut behind them. Zeke shoved a steel shelf in front of it, barricading the entrance. They were trapped. The only exit leading to a ventilation shaft barely big enough for one person. This is insane, Zeke muttered, leaning against the wall. This wasn't supposed to happen. Cassian paced the room, his grip on the amulet tightening. He turned to Callie, his frustration boiling over. If you've got some brilliant insight, now's the time. Callie stepped forward, her eyes locked on the amulet. It doesn't want to leave, Cass. That's the problem. It's anchored here. It's pulling us deeper, not letting us go. Then what we do? Zeke asked. We destroy it, Callie said firmly. Cassian's jaw tightened. No, that's the payday. We don't destroy it. Look around, Callie snapped, gesturing to the locked door and the alarms still blaring. Do you think we're getting out of here with it? This thing doesn't want to be sold or stolen. It wants control. Cassian stared at her, his mind racing. Every instinct screamed to hold on to the plan, to trust his preparation. But the amulet's hum was relentless now, a taunting reminder of how everything had unraveled. He hated how right Callie sounded. Before he could respond, the door shuddered as the guards began ramming it. Time was running out. Callie stepped closer, her voice low but forceful. You can't control it, Cass. You have to let it go. Cassian hesitated, his fingers loosening on the amulet. For the first time he felt the weight of it, not just physical, but something deeper, heavier. He could almost hear it whispering to him, promising power, success, perfection, everything he'd ever wanted. But he saw the cost in Callie's eyes, and in his own. He held the amulet out to her. "Do it." Callie took it, her hands trembling. She placed it on the floor and raised Zeke's crowbar. The amulet's glow flared, its hum becoming a deafening roar. For a moment the air seemed to ripple, the walls trembling, and then the crowbar came down. The amulet shattered with a sound like breaking glass and a distant scream. The hum stopped, the glow vanished. The alarms quieted, the building returning to its ordinary stillness. The three of them stood in silence, the weight of what had happened settling over them. "We'll call it even," Callie said, her voice steady. "Let's get out of here." Cassian nodded, leading them into the night. Behind them, the shards of the amulet lay scattered, dark and lifeless. Or so they seemed. The building was unnervingly quiet as the remnants of the shattered amulet lay scattered on the floor, its faint hum extinguished. The oppressive atmosphere that had clung to them since entering the museum seemed to dissipate, but Cassian couldn't shake the unease in his chest. Even with the artifact destroyed, its influence lingered in his thoughts, like the memory of a nightmare. Zeke shoved the barricade aside, glancing back at the others. "That was too close. Let's get out before those guards regroup." Callie nodded, her breath still ragged, but her grip on the crowbar was firm. She gave the broken pieces of the amulet one last glance, her expression unreadable. "Yeah, time to go." Cassian led the way down the maintenance corridor, his steps more deliberate now. He replayed the night in his mind, searching for the moment everything had gone wrong. It wasn't supposed to end like this, running empty-handed, a broken artifact left behind, his flawless record tarnished. Yet part of him knew the plan had failed the moment they laid hands on the amulet. "Boss," Callie said, breaking the silence as they crept toward the exit. "You okay?" "Fine," Cassian said curtly, not slowing his pace. "You don't look fine," she pressed. "You haven't said a word since." "I said I'm fine," he snapped, cutting her off. He didn't turn to face her, but his shoulders were tense, his movements stiff. Callie rolled her eyes but let it drop. She wasn't about to poke the bear while they were still technically on the job. The crew emerged into the cool night air through a side entrance, slipping past the remaining guards thanks to Mara's quick directions. The tech specialist was waiting for them in the alley, her laptop perched precariously on a garbage bin. "You're late," Mara said, not looking up from her screen. "I had to fake a fire alarm to get the guards off your backs. You're welcome, by the way."
"Yeah!"
"Thanks," Zeke muttered, collapsing onto a nearby crate. "You want to tell her, or should I?" "Tell me what?" Mara asked, glancing up. Her eyes flicked between their weary faces, her brow furrowing. "Where's the artifact?" "It's gone," Callie said bluntly. "Smashed it." Mara blinked, her mouth opening and closing as she processed the words. "You what? That thing was worth millions!" "It wasn't worth our lives," Callie said, her voice firm. "It was screwing with everything. Us, the guards, the building. We couldn't have made it out with it." Mara looked to Cassian for confirmation, her expression a mix of disbelief and irritation. "Is this true?" Cassian finally stopped pacing and leaned against the wall, his face grim. "It's true. The amulet wasn't just a relic, it had power, real power, and it was tearing us apart." "You've got to be kidding me," Mara groaned, throwing her hands up. "Months of planning, all for nothing?" "Not nothing," Callie said, her tone sharp. "We're alive. That's not nothing." Mara muttered something under her breath, slamming her laptop shut. "I hope the buyer's understanding." "They won't be," Cassian said flatly, pushing off the wall. But that's my problem, not yours." The ride back to their safe house was tense. Zeke and Mara rode in silence, their frustration palpable. Callie sat beside Cassian in the front, the city lights casting fleeting shadows across his face as he drove. He hadn't said another word since leaving the museum, and she could feel the weight of his thoughts pressing down on the air between them. "You did the right thing, you know," Callie said finally. Cassian didn't respond, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "You couldn't have planned for something like that," she continued. "No one could. It was out of our hands the second we touched it." "I don't believe in luck," he said quietly. his voice low but firm. I never have. Callie smiled faintly. Maybe it's time you started. He glanced at her, his expression softening just enough to show the cracks in his resolve. What if you're wrong? What if we could have controlled it? Used it? And what if it controlled us instead? Callie countered. Some things aren't meant to be taken, Cass. Cassian sighed, his shoulders sagging. He didn't respond, but Callie knew she'd struck a chord. He wasn't the type to admit defeat, but tonight had taught them both a lesson. Not every prize was worth the cost. Back at the safe house, the crew disbanded for the night, leaving Cassian alone in the dimly lit common room. He sat at the table, staring at a blueprint of the museum spread out before him. His mind churned with frustration and questions he couldn't answer. For the first time, he didn't feel in control, and it terrified him. In the shadows of the room, a faint hum rose, almost imperceptible. Cassian froze, his breath catching. He turned toward the sound, his heart pounding. But the room was empty, or so it seemed. Thanks for listening. If the story stuck with you, come back next time for another journey.